The photograph, in the hands of the artist, is seldom a product of accident or chance. It is the culmination of a process plotted and set in motion long before the first exposure is made. But to many, the techniques of photography are as mysterious as alchemy.
There is nothing mysterious about technique. I like to think about the fundamental properties of photography, the chemical and physical and optical properties, as representing the mechanics of the medium. And it is the knowledge and the application of these mechanics to the problem at hand that we can call the techniques. It's really nothing in itself except as a means to an end, a means of realizing with the greatest possible accuracy what the artist intends and sees and completes in his image. Techniques are simply a means of bringing about in the print the image as visualized by the artist before he operates his shutter.
As Edward Weston put it, in the last analysis, man himself is the actual medium of expression. And just as man is the basic element of expression, the basic element of the photographic image is light.
Well, of course, light is the essence of photography. It's hard to imagine photography without light, although, of course, we can photograph with light that is beyond the visible range. But in itself, it can be considered as much an actuality as is substance, such as rock or flesh. It's an element to be evaluated and interpreted in its own right. The impression of light and the impression of substance, which are achieved through a very careful use and comprehension of lighting conditions, are equally essential to the realistic photograph. Of course, when we say realistic, we have to define what we mean, because the greater number of creative photographs are so-called departures from reality, where inherent values, qualities are expanded or controlled to achieve a desired end. I remember taking a series of photographs of a church at sunrise in Hawaii. The camera was set up quite a time before sunrise, and some negatives were made early dawn light. And then a series of photographs were made as the sunrise struck the top of the spire and the light progressed down the spire into the main body of the church. It is a very interesting point here that it wasn't simply a series of identical exposures. The prints were not just automatically produced one after the other, but each image has to be balanced to approximate the total effect desired. That is, the balance of light and shade and the feeling of presence, the feeling of sunlight and of the constantly changing shadow values.
Of course, the usable light for the photographer is the light that passes through the lens of the camera. And the lens can be an instrument of marvelous precision and refinement. Zeiss, the tessar, the triplet, protar, ectar, exnar, the componon, the ectanon, the cook, C5, K2, X1, G, A, the long, the wide, the normal, the telephoto.
In the final analysis, photography can be reduced to a few simple principles. But unlike most art, it seems very complex at the initial approach.
SEI, ASA, f-stop, t-stop, reflectance, incidence, brightness, intensity, strobe, wink, flash, bounce, natural. Take a subject for a photograph. An egg. Not a mountain or a breaking wave, but an egg. How can it be seen as a simple form occupying space, its shape delineated by light? Let's place it in an egg cup and look at it this way. And this way. And this way. And this.
We should always bear in mind that photography is a language, a means for conveying thought, information, interpretation, and expression. Just as in the spoken and written language, we have journalism and poetry and scientific essays and news and so on. But all too often we find that it is a very confused jargon, confused because of the unclear mixtures and distillations, mechanics, concepts, tastes, habits, and expediencies. The justification for technique is being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. In this way, it isn't very different from a performing musician who does a great deal of practicing, working, and constructing all kinds of reflexes in his mind, so that at the moment of performance he has this reservoir of experience to fall back on. And in a sense, we must do exactly the same thing in photography. We have to practice. We have to be constantly working with the camera and with the prints to keep our fingers really alert and our eyes sharp.
Photograph number 1. An illustration of what is known as the limb effect. A white object having a curved surface, in this instance our egg, and illuminated by a light source falling along the lens axis, will show a dark outline against a white background. This is what is known as the limb effect. To continue this metamorphosis of an egg, with a single light source from the side and the axis light remaining as fill-in light, a new range of exposure values must be accommodated, and the character of the image changes in accordance with the artist's intention, as witness the egg photographed in side light. With the light from the opposite side added and the fill-in light turned off, yet a third effect is achieved. Who would have thought that an egg had so many faces? As witness this pure form, this perfect shape, this egg in core light. With another light change, no light directly on the subject, only ambient and bounce light, and with the changed exposure values noted and accounted for, we can expect our egg to change character once again.
As I continue to write, to teach, and to photograph, I am increasingly aware of the futility of expressive formulas and of the importance of a competent technique. I do not make a picture with a cable release in one hand and a characteristic curve in the other, but I surely have to know what the curve represents.
The final metamorphosis of the egg, as photographed in ambient and bounce light. And behold the many faces of the egg.
My basic approach to photography depends on the visualization of the final print before exposure is made. I say this very often, and I don't know whether people realize just exactly what is meant. When you visualize a photograph, it is not only a matter of seeing it in the mind's eye, but it's also and primarily a matter of feeling it, feeling the various qualities that you wish to in the final print.
In his daybook, the master photographer, Edward Weston, in my work, the final form of presentation seen on the finished print pre-visioned, complete in every detail of texture, movement, proportion, before exposure. The shutter's release automatically and finally fixes my conception.
A lot of people may suppose that I have a sharp, detailed replica of the print to come floating in front of my eyes. Well, I really don't have anything quite as complete as that, although in a sense I scan this mental image with a rapidly changing awareness of different qualities. I have my optical qualities, my compositional values and arrangements, the depth of tone, and of course as I think about the photograph, all of these qualities will instinctively and subtly change and adapt one to the other, so that finally I can say that I visualize the essence of the photograph to be. I have suggested many times in my teaching and writings that there is no photographic problem that can't be solved by logic and the application of a few basic principles of technique.
The photographic process is a controlled cycle, not a hit or miss affair. The properties of film stock, developers, and so forth can be scientifically determined, but the creative use of these known properties is a matter of the individual artist.
My technique is largely applied to problems of interpretation rather than to factual transcription. Interpretation based on visualization. In other words, I prefer to work more on departures from reality than on reality itself, which is really the very casual, superficial duplication of the external scene. With the visualization well in hand and in mind, the craft procedures follow in logical order. First, of course, we have to assume the camera position required in relation to our compositional ideas. This can be intuitive. Recall Edward Weston carrying his big 8x10 camera along the beach or in the mountains, and when he observed something that excited his photographic interest, he would walk up to a given point, place the camera, and he very rarely moved the instrument from this position. After we have composed our image on the ground glass or in the finder of the camera, we, of course, think of the tonal values of the print, and that means that we have to evaluate the brightnesses of the subject. We do this by the use of exposure meters.